Pembroke.
Madam Speaker, I begin my remarks by recognizing the freedom-loving, independent-minded, hard-working people who live in Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke. Never has the threat to democracy in Canada been more in jeopardy than with a Prime Minister who's quick to accuse others of being racist while he enjoys dressing up in costumes and blackface to make fun of other people's cultures and skin color. My question to the Prime Minister was specifically related to an unaccounted-for amount in the National Defence budget of $15 billion. The 2022 departmental plan indicates its intent to spend $77 billion between 2022-23 and 2024-25. However, the corresponding numbers in budget 2022 are roughly $23 billion higher. While part of this spending pertains to new policy measures presented in budget 2022, there's no explanation for close to $15 billion. Surely by coincidence, the Canada Growth Fund was announced as something in the budget document that would be initially capitalized at $15 billion over the next 5 years from the existing fiscal framework. The only $15 billion parliamentarians are aware of unaccounted for in the budget to be misappropriated is the missing $15 billion identified by the non-partisan parliamentary budget officer. The objective of the Canada Growth Fund, Canadians are told, is to close the large gap between what Canada is experiencing between the public and private capital now being spent each year, $15 to $25 billion, and the amount that's required to be siphoned from the economy, $125 to $140 billion, if Canada is to have a net zero Marxist economy by 2050. This same language was used recently by the Defence Minister when it was announced that continental defence modernization needs $3 billion from, once again, existing budget 2022 allocations. No new funding was announced for this finally acknowledged threat to Canada and the rules-based international order. The more sanctions Canada employs against Russia, the more we draw Russia's attention to our borders. Canada's Arctic sovereignty is at risk. The government House Leader, using the usual mannered evasive response to all and any questions practiced by the Prime Minister to irritating extremes, ignores the fact that it was the decision of the Liberal Party to disband during the decade of darkness at National Defence Canada's Rapid Response Light Brigade. Its role was to defend Canadian Arctic sovereignty. When Canada lost the capabilities of the Canadian Airborne Regiment, the Liberal Party was in effect inviting other countries like China to take over Canada's far north. The fact our Arctic sovereignty is at risk was recently recognized by NATO. It's about time the federal government recognized the risk in Canada's far north. Talk is rarely replaced by this government with action, overpromise and underperform. It'll take a conservative government to get boots on the ground. And let's not forget the commitments to Ukraine that look nice when delivered, but come at the detriment to our capabilities. Since the start of the war in Ukraine, Canada has sent approximately $394 million US in additional military aid from the Canadians' military stock of weapons deemed available for donation, which is now largely depleted and will need to be replaced. Canada's United Nations standing is diminishing, as evidenced in our lost bid to Ireland in 2020 for a rotating seat on the UN Security Council. We were not invited to join the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, the soon-to-be largest free trade area in the world, nor were we asked to join the United States, Australia, and the United Kingdom in AUKUS, a new defense pact aimed at containing the growing military might of China.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of National Defence.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Every day, Canada and our allies count on the Canadian Armed Forces to safeguard our citizens and uphold the rules-based international order that underpins global security and prosperity. And as parliamentarians, we need to ensure that the talented professionals of our defence team have the resources that they need to keep pace in an increasingly complex threat environment. Here at home and across the globe, we're seeing the resources of great power competition, the effects of the pandemic on recruitment, retention, and readiness of the CAF members, and the role that climate change plays on defence and security, including in our Arctic region. We need to account for these issues and make sure that we're staying one step ahead if we are to remain strong at home, secure in North America, and engaged in the world. So it's for good reason that the Department of National Defence has one of the largest operating and capital budgets in government. And Budget 2022 contains a variety of new investments for our military. We've added $8 billion in new funding on top of funding already forecasted in the departmental plan and in Canada's defence policy, which, as you know, we will be updating to better reflect the evolving security environment, Madam Speaker. The honourable member is referencing in her original question a recent analysis that the Parliamentary Budget Office, or PBO, released in Budget 2022. In the analysis, the PBO commented on the difference between the forecasts of the different defence spending in a graph in Budget 2022 and the forecasts in National Defence's most recent departmental plan. But the budget and the departmental plans are separate documents with two different ways of presenting future spending, Madam Speaker. This approach is consistent across all departments as part of the expenditure reporting cycle to Parliament. In fact, the $15 billion difference suggested by the member opposite is not a discrepancy at all. Federal Budget 2022 outlined forecasted spending, and the departmental plans outlined what has been approved at any given time by the Treasury Board and Parliament. As a result, the National Defence Departmental Plan reflects only capital spending that has been fully approved through the Treasury Board submission process at the time the report was prepared. The budget, on the other hand, contains future spending not yet approved by the Treasury Board, hence the difference in the estimated numbers. For large departments like D&D, this difference appears exaggerated because we only access the money when we need it, Madam Speaker. In this particular case, the difference mainly composed of forecasted capital spending and expenses related to military operations. More precisely, the largest difference between the estimated D&D plan spending in budget graph versus the departmental plan is major SSE capital projects for which D&D has not yet sought Treasury Board or parliamentary approvals for the associated supply, which means the associated funding is not in the D&D's reference levels. As for CAF operations, the associated incremental funding is only assessed in year and thus not reflected as planned spending in D&D's departmental plan. That would include Operations Impact, Reassurance, Unifier, Artemis, and Peace Support operations. Canadians can rest assured that the department is committed to responsible stewardship and transparent spending as we work to keep Canadians safe here at home and protect and promote Canadian interests around the world, Madam Speaker.
Honourable member for Pembroke, the honourable member. I'm really sorry. I always miss. Member for Renfrew-Nipissing-Pembroke.
On June 14th, the Finance Minister, during testimony before the statutory committee struck to investigate the declaration of the Emergencies Act, stated her concern for the diminished standing of Canada's international reputation. Canada continues to suffer irreparable harm to our international reputation as a result of invoking the Emergencies Act in the absence of any clear and compelling reason to do so. And it gives me no comfort to report to Canadians the Prime Minister's nickname in European capitals he hides in these days is the Gropenführer, in obvious reference to the Kokanee Grope scandal and how the Prime Minister mistreats female journalists and dismisses because they're women. Canada risks surrendering our nationhood as we become more and more isolated from those who can help us most when we need it.
The Honourable Parliamentary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We continue making significant